Hi there, welcome, and thank you for watching our workshop today on gradebooks in D2L. My name is Anna Young, and I'm an instructional designer in the Office of Online Learning at Nashville State Community College. And I'm going to be here today to just share a few tips and tricks for organizing and optimizing your D2L gradebooks in preparation for the coming semester. As you all know, the gradebook is one of the most important things that has to be set up at the beginning of each term. I really can't emphasize enough how important it is to get your gradebook set up and ready to go as early as possible in the semester, because if any issues arise, it's usually much harder to fix those issues on the back end towards the end of the semester as opposed to at the beginning. So with that in mind, I'm just going to go over some of the basics for setting up grades in D2L. I'm going to go over how to go through the setup wizard, how to create grade categories and items, and how to attach grades to assignments and activities. We will also be going over some common issues within D2L gradebooks, including some reasons why students can't see their overall grade. Students can't see a specific grade item. If you get an error message that says final calculated grade does not sum to 100%, or if you find that you're unable to delete a grade item. So we will cover all of those issues and how to correct each one. So I'll be switching back and forth frequently between this presentation and D2L in my browser in order to demonstrate some of the things I'm going to talk about live inside of D2L. So as we're going through, just be aware that I'll be switching between the slides and D2L in the browser. Okay, so let's get started. Just a quick overview of grades in D2L. As you are probably aware, grade items can be attached to activities in D2L, so you can create several grade items and then link them individually to items in your assignment Dropbox, to discussion assignments, or to quizzes. And you can tell if a grade item has been linked to an assignment because you'll notice next to the assignment right here, if you see a little, looks like a ribbon you would win at the county fair next to an assignment, that means that it is linked to a gradebook item. Grades in D2L can also be standalone, however, so you might have a standalone participation, attendance, or a presentation grade that you manually fill in once that assignment is completed outside of D2L. So our first step in getting our gradebook set up is, of course, planning. I highly recommend before you do any work in D2L getting your gradebook set up, that you go ahead and list out your grading scheme in advance on paper in the way that you would represent it to students in your syllabus. So for example, and you could do this, it could look however you want it to be. Just jot down what what grade items you're going to have, what percentage or point values you're going to assign to each one, and just note any extra credit or bonus items, much as you would do when you're filling out the grading information in your syllabus. So the example I have here, for just an example course, there are 10 discussions worth 15% of the total grade, 10 quizzes worth 25%, 2 tests worth 50%. 10% allotted to participation. And then there are 3 extra credit opportunities with the opportunity to earn up to 3 additional percentage points on top of the final grade. So all of those, so I've got my grade categories listed here, the weight that's assigned to each, how many grade items I have, and then I've verified that those all sum up to 100%. So some of you I know may prefer to use a points grading scheme. Here I have represented the values of each grade item in terms of percentages. So you can also do points. With percentages, if you're going for a percentage-based grading scheme, you'll want to make sure that that sums to 100%. If you're doing points, it doesn't have to sum to 100 necessarily or 100 points, though you can certainly do it out of 100 points. But I do recommend that you choose a nice round number. So say a total possible of 500 points or 1,000 points, just for the sake of simplicity in terms of setting all of this up. So once you've got your plan down on paper, the next step for setting up grades inside of D2L is to go through the setup wizard. This is the first step in setting up your gradebook, but it isn't necessarily the only time that you will go into the setup wizard. You can complete the steps in the setup wizard as many times as you need to. This is just essentially where you set up the basic settings that you want to apply to your gradebook in D2L. When you go through the setup wizard, you're going to go through 7 steps. It'll walk you through step by step, and it will ask you to make decisions about how you would like your gradebook to be set up. Some of those decisions include, would you like it to be a points-based or a percentage-based gradebook? Would you like to treat ungraded items as if they were 0 automatically, or would you like to drop ungraded items? And then, would you like to let students see the overall grade average or their final grade at any point in time in the course, or would you prefer to keep that hidden? Those are just some of the options that you will go through in the setup wizard. And we're now going to walk through some of those steps. So we're going to switch over to the browser. If you are inside of your course shell, you'll access the grade area if you have the default navbar in grades. And then you'll go to the Setup Wizard tab up at the top. If you don't have a gradebook set up yet, and you don't have any grade items here, I do have some. It will when you go to grades, it will default to that Setup Wizard and prompt you to go ahead and set up a gradebook, but we have to navigate there. Once you reach the Grade Setup Wizard, this first page shows how the gradebook is currently set up if you've already gone through the wizard. So it'll explain, for instance, which grading system, weighted or points you've selected, and all of the other options as they're currently set. To go through the Setup Wizard, scroll down to the bottom and click Start. And first up, we have Step 1, choosing a grading system. So this is one of the most important decisions you'll make in terms of your gradebook setup. And your basic 2 choices here are a weighted gradebook or a percentage-based gradebook. In other words, the final grade sums to a total possible points of 100%, a total possible value of 100%, excuse me. And then all of the individual grade items and grade categories represent a percentage value of that total 100%. The other option is a points-based gradebook. In this setup, the final grade is worth a number or a value out of a certain number of points, and all of the assignment categories and items add up to that total number of points. You also have the option to set up a formula gradebook, but that is very rare, and I don't recommend really playing around with that. For most instructors, in most situations, you're going to want to choose either a weighted gradebook or a points gradebook, and that is entirely your preference. I usually go with a weighted gradebook, just for the sake of simplicity. I just find it's easier to have categories summing to 100%. Rather than trying to assign individual point values to each assignment, but that's purely my preference. So as I go through this, I'm going to demonstrate what a weighted gradebook looks like. So once you've selected that, click Continue to go to Step 2. And Step 2 controls how you want the final grade to be released to students. You have 2 options here. You can either release the calculated final grade to students or the adjusted final grade. The calculated final grade is just the mathematical grade that students get. The adjusted final grade allows you to go in and modify the calculated grade as you wish. So if you want to add a couple of points to, so say you have a student who has a final grade of 89.4% and you want to give them just a couple of points to get them up to a 90. The adjusted final grade option would allow you to do that. If you prefer for students to just get what they get, and whatever the mathematical calculation comes out to is what their final grade is, just select that first option, calculated final grade. Then you have an option, automatically release final grade. And as it says on the screen, when enabled, the system automatically marks users' final grades as released once created. So what that means is essentially that the final grade will be automatically released to students and it will be automatically visible to them at all times. I also prefer usually to keep that checked because I like for students to know where they stand at all times in my course. Once you've selected those options how you like them, click continue. To go to step 3, which controls grade calculations, especially calculations of ungraded items. So you have another big choice to make here. You can either drop ungraded items, in other words, any items that have not yet been graded, including grade items for assignments in the future, will be dropped and not calculated as a part of the current grade. Or you can treat ungraded items as 0. What that does is it treats any item, any grade item that has not been graded as 0. That includes both assignments that students just haven't turned in, and it also includes assignments that have not yet come due. So this choice can radically change what your gradebook looks like to students. If you choose drop ungraded items, students' grades might look a little bit artificially inflated because they may have, they'll automatically receive grades. They will have grades for any items that they have turned in and that have been graded by the instructor, but anything that they have not turned in will be dropped, and any assignment that they have not yet completed will also be dropped. Treat ungraded items as 0 will result in students' grades looking a little bit artificially lowered. So what this ends up doing is it makes it look as though students are beginning at a lower percentage value and then building up towards reaching 100%. Because any future assignments have been graded as 0, so that'll significantly lower their current average. So that's purely up to the instructor. One thing to keep in mind, if you do choose drop ungraded items, you will have to go back in and manually put in 0s for any assignments that students just didn't turn in. That's just something to keep in mind if you choose that option. But if you have students who are asking you, why does my grade look so low, even though I've made, a 95%, 100% on the quizzes or the assignments that have just recently passed, it's probably because you chose treat ungraded items as 0. So any future assignments have already been graded as 0, and only the assignments that they've already completed and had graded have any grades. So that'll significantly lower their average. I generally like to go for drop ungraded items. I like for students to feel like they're starting off at a higher place, that they're starting from 100% rather than at 0%. So that's my preference, but different instructors have different feelings on how they prefer to do that. So once you have made that decision, go ahead and click continue. Go to step 4, choose default grade scheme. And we do have a default grade scheme here at Nashville State, so most all instructors are going to want to just choose that default percentage grade scheme. It's already selected for you with the radio button. It is possible to set up alternative course grading schemes if you wish, but the default for most instructors is going to be percentage based. What that means is that it's going to apply the Nashville State standard grading scheme, wherein 90 to 100% as a final grade equals an A, 80 to 89% equals a B, and so on and so forth. So we'll just select that, continue. Step 5 has you set the number of decimal places to display to students viewing their grades. The default is 2, and I usually leave it at that. Step 6 controls student view display options, or how students view how the grade is displayed to them in their view of the gradebook. So, for instance, you have a couple of options here. You can choose whether you want to display the points grade. So even if you have a gradebook that is calculated based on weight or based on percentage, you can still show them both their points grade and their weighted grade if you want to, or one or the other. You just deselect any box that you don't wish to display to students. The grade scheme symbol, that shows students the letter grade that they received for a particular grade. So that just shows whether they made an A, B, C, D, or F. A grade scheme color allows you to apply a color scheme to how the grades are displayed to students. I think the default colors are red, yellow, green, blue, just applying a color to represent each possible grade, A, B, C, D, or F. But I usually like to leave that on. Again, you're asked a number of decimal places to display to the student. I usually leave that at the default of 2. Characters displayed, that controls the number of characters that are displayed in the name of each grade item. The default is 15. I usually don't change that unless you might have some grade items that have really, really long names. It's always a possibility. And then finally, you have how the final grade calculation is shown to students or not. You can choose to have students be able to see how their grade was calculated in their gradebook, if you wish. And I usually like to do that too, because my philosophy on that is more information is always better, and it's always better to give students as many tools as they need in order to understand why they received the grade that they did. So I leave that on. Continue. And then step 7 is just the summary of all of the settings that you just changed. So this just shows all of the changes that we just made. So we have a weighted grading system. The final grade to release is the calculated final grade. It's automatically released. We've chosen to drop ungraded items, to keep final grades automatically updated, to use a percentage grade scheme, to display 2 decimal places for grade item values. And then we also have all of the display options that we selected for how students are going to actually see those grades in their gradebook. So if everything looks fine, click Finish to complete the Setup Wizard process. And again, this is the first step that you complete when you're setting up your gradebook, but it doesn't have to be the only time you go through Setup Wizard. You can go back through Setup Wizard anytime you want to and change any particular setting if you realize you've changed your mind, for instance, and you want a points gradebook instead of a weighted gradebook. Very easy to change it. Even after you've put in grade items for students, it's a very it shouldn't disrupt anything like that. Okay, so our next step, now that we've completed the Setup Wizard, is to create grade categories. Grade categories are just like what they sound like. These are just organizational boxes in which you will put individual grade items. So you saw that scheme that we created when we were planning out our grade scheme for our syllabus. Go back to that slide. We have discussions, quizzes, tests, and participation. Those are our grade categories. And then within each grade category, we might have, discussion 1, discussion 2, discussion 3, we might have quiz 1, quiz 2, quiz 3. Those are the individual grade items that go inside of those larger categories. So the grade categories are a really important organizational unit in your gradebook, and I recommend that you do use grade categories. If you have a weighted gradebook, you have to use grade categories. All grade items in a weighted gradebook must be assigned to a category, because each category has a percentage weight associated to it equaling 100% of the total. But even if you have a points gradebook, I still highly recommend that you use grade categories just for the sake of organization, because it can help keep your gradebook really neat and clean and organized. And again, those categories are going to come straight from your syllabus. So typical grade categories might include your discussions, your quizzes, your tests, exams, labs. Those are your categories. And then once you've created those grade categories, you'll create the individual grade items that go inside of each category. So again, that's things like, your module 1 discussion, your module 2 discussion, your module 1 quiz, module 2 quiz, and so on and so forth. Each of those items, however, must be sorted into a higher level category. So we're going to switch back over to D2L, and I'm going to show you how to create grade categories and grade items, and then assign grade items to their respective grade categories. So let's switch back over there. So Setting up grade items and grade categories can be controlled from the Manage Grades tab inside of Grades. So you just want to go there. And this is where you control exactly which items are going into your gradebook, how many points or how many percentage points are assigned to each one, and which assignments they are associated with. So to create a grade category, and I recommend that you start by creating all of your grade categories and then assigning your grade items to those. So we start more general, more broad, and then we'll do the more narrow items later on. So we go to new category. And let's say we want to create a category called tests. So I recommend just giving it a descriptive name so that you know what all of the items are in this category. This category is just going to include tests. You can give it a short name if you want to. Usually I only do that if I have like a really long name for a grade item or grade category. In this case, I think test is short enough. You can add a description if you want to. That's really just for your own reference. And then you will determine what weight you want to assign to this category, because this is a weighted gradebook that we are working with. The default is 10%, so that's 10% of the final grade. You can edit that if you want to. So say we want to make this 15%. Next, you have the option to allow category grade to exceed category weight. And you're only going to check that if you are wanting to assign bonus points. If you think that if you're going to assign any bonus points to any item in this category that will boost the student's grade over that weight of 15%, or more than 100% of all items in that category, then you would check that box. Okay, our next set of options regards how we want the weight to be distributed within the category. So how much of the weight of that total weight of the category do we want to assign to each individual item in that category? Now, you can choose to manually assign weight to items in the category. And what that will do, that will require you to go through and just manually set the weight on each one. I normally don't like to do that with weighted grade books, because that means that you have to make sure that you are manually assigning weight to each item so that they will all total up to 100% of that category, if that makes sense. I usually like to go for distribute weights by points, or distribute weight evenly across all items is usually the best option, because it'll just automatically make all items in that category worth the same amount relative to the overall category. If you have any bonus, or if you have any items that you anticipate you're going to drop for students in this category, so say, you want to drop the lowest test grade, this is where you would do that. So the number of lowest non-bonus items to drop for each user, let's say we want to drop the lowest grade, we would drop just 1 grade. If you want to drop the 2 lowest test grades, we put 2, and so on. Next, we have display options for the grade category. You can display the class average in that category to students, the grade distribution for the entire class in that category to students. Those are at least options that are available to you. You also have this option, override display options for this item, and I suggest do not mess with this. Don't check this box. Just because that will change how this category is displayed versus the other categories. It's usually not necessary, so just skip that one. Save and close. And you'll see that we have just created a new category called tests. Now, categories in the Manage Grades area are going to be in this light blue color, and they're going to be kind of like headings. So any items that are contained inside of the category are indented slightly. So that's how you can tell which category they belong to. But items are in white, categories are in light blue. So next, let's add some grade items to that grade category that we just created. So we'll go back up to the top, new item. And you've got a couple of different options for what kind of item you want to create. In most cases, it's going to be a numeric item. That's just going to be your standard item, in which a grade is assigned out of a specified total number of points. There's also a couple of kind of unusual options like pass fail, but those are usually pretty rarely used. So we'll go in numeric. And then we're going to name our grade item. So remember, this is one of the individual assignments. So let's call this one, say, test 1. You can give it a short name, for instance, like T1. That's something I usually do with grade items. If I have discussions, I'll do like D1, D2, D3. Quizzes, Q1, Q2, Q3 is the short name, just to save a little bit of space in the gradebook columns. That's totally optional, however. And then we are going to assign it to a category. And again, because this is a weighted gradebook, all grade items must be assigned to a category. So we have to put it inside of a category. So we're going to put it in our test category. And then we're going to set how we want this grade item, how many points we want it to be worth. So let's say 10. The default is 10, but you can set that point value to be whatever you would like. Set it to 100, what have you. Either way, it's going to, because we elected to distribute the weight of items evenly across the category, right now, this grade item is worth 100% of all items in that category because it's the only one. If we add another grade item, that number, that weight in the box that's grayed out is going to halve and go down to 50% because if we're distributing the weight of items evenly across all items in the category, naturally, each one is going to be worth 50% of the total. You have the option to check can exceed if you would like it to be possible for students to earn above 100% on this grade item. You would check that box. If this item is extra credit, or if it's a bonus item, you will check the bonus box. So that means it's not required. However, students can earn additional points on top of other items in this category if they do complete this assignment or complete that the assignment that's associated with this grade. Don't change the default grade scheme. That's set to your default that you chose in the setup wizard. You can add a rubric. I don't really recommend doing that with grade items, though. I recommend only adding rubrics directly to the assignment itself. And I usually just skip display options. But you also have the option to show the class average and grade distribution for this individual item to students as well. And again, just make sure you do not override display options. Anytime you see that option, just always make sure to skip that. Click Save and Close. And if we come down here, we now see that we have a test 1 indented under that test category we created. So we have an item that has been added to the test category. And right now, like I said, it's 100% of that category. 100% of the points in this category are assigned to this one because it's the only one. But the category itself is only worth 15% of the total calculated grade. Okay, so we're going to switch back over to our slides. And next, we're going to go through associating grade items with assignments. So we've created some categories, we've created some items, and now we have to tie those items to the assignments they go to in D2L if we're wanting to link those up. That association doesn't happen automatically. You have to go to the assignment and go ahead and link it to the grade item. The assignment and the grade item are two separate things that have to be linked together. So for instance, if you created a bunch of grade items like discussion 1, discussion 2, discussion 3, you have to go to discussions and link each individual discussion to its respective grade item. And I will just very briefly show you how to do that using the example of a quiz. So if we go to assessments, quizzes, I have a couple of quizzes in here that we can use. And let's say we want to link quiz 1 to a grade item. Now we can tell it's not linked to a grade item because there is no little blue ribbon symbol next to it. Like with this chapter 1 quiz. It has a little ribbon symbol next to it. It means that it is associated with a grade item. Quiz 1, however, is not yet. So we're going to click the drop down arrow next to that, edit. and then go to assessment. The assessment tab for both quizzes and discussions is going to control everything related to grading. And let's say we want, once this quiz is graded, we want to automatically publish the evaluation. So we automatically want to publish the results. And then you'll have a drop-down menu that'll allow you to select a grade item to associate it with. So let's, just for the sake of simplicity, we're going to go ahead and associate it with that test 1 item we just created. And then I'm going to check synchronize automatically to Gradebook. And again, that just means that whenever you're done grading, it will automatically update whatever grade you give to a student's quiz and sync that to the Gradebook. Save and close. And now if we look at that quiz in the quiz list, we'll see that it has a ribbon symbol next to it because it's associated with a grade item. And if we go over to grades, manage grades, and we look at that grade item, we'll see in this middle column, there is now a question mark symbol next to quizzes. And that indicates that it is associated with an assignment. So the assignment and the grade item are tied together now. Okay, next we're going to go through a couple of common issues that we often see instructors run into when setting up their gradebook or troubleshooting errors that are pretty common. Starting off with students who cannot see their overall grade. So if you recall, when we went through the setup wizard, there was an option to set it so that the calculated final grade would be automatically updated. That was in step 3 of the setup wizard. Automatically keep final grade updated, and I usually recommend that you do check that. As well as in step 6, there is also an option to display final grade calculation to users. Generally recommend that you check that as well, just so students can see all the information available about their grade. So those are the 2 setup wizard items that you'll need to select in order to make sure that students can see their overall grade. You can tell if students are not able to see their final grade, because if you go to the gradebook itself, you look at the list of students you have, if this eyeball symbol next to the final calculated grade in the final calculated grade column is not open like it is right now, so if it has a slash through it, that means students cannot see their final calculated grade. And the way to fix that, even if you selected, automatically keep final grade updated, you still have to manually go in and release the final calculated grade in order for students to be able to see it. So this is something you have to do regardless. So if you go to the final calculated grade column inside of Enter Grades, click the drop-down arrow, go to Enter Grades, select all students in the list, and then check Release/Unrelease. And that is going to release all grades to students in the gradebook, meaning that they will be able to see them now. Now, if you elected to have a final adjusted grade, what you'll first have to do is transfer the final calculated grade over into the final adjusted grade column. You can do that by coming up to this heading at the top where it says Final Grades and clicking the drop-down arrow. Click Transfer All. Yes. And you'll notice once it transfers over, it's going to pull the final calculated grade over from this column over into the final adjusted grade column. And then if you are wanting to assign students an adjusted grade, you're able to change it inside of these editable text boxes. So for instance, if I wanted to change this to 9, I could. And then again, you're going to want to make sure it's released. Click Release. If these boxes over here in the right-hand column titled Released are checked, it means that it is visible to students. Click Save and Close. Yes. And then you should see an open eyeball next to the items in the final calculated grade column. So that's how you fix that issue of students not being able to see their overall grade. And detailed instructions are also provided on this slide, in the PowerPoint slide that I'm going to send around. Sometimes students will say that they're not able to see a specific grade, and there is also this is a very common issue. It's a very fixable issue, and it usually comes down to whether or not a restriction has been put on that grade item. Now, how do you know if a restriction has been put on a grade item? Well, we go to manage grades and we look for the clock icon. We don't want to see the clock icon anywhere in manage grades. If you see that, you need to get rid of that. So what happens, and the reason why that's a problem is because sometimes instructors will set a due date or an end date on a grade item, thinking that they were setting the due date for the activity. Remember that the activity and the assignment and the grade item are two separate things. So if you set a start or end date on a grade item, that means that once that end date passed for that grade item, it's not going to be visible to students anymore. So we don't want to set any dates on grade items. We want students to be able to see all of their grades all of the time. So I'll show you an example of what this issue looks like. If we go to manage grades, again, we're looking for the little clock stopwatch icon, and there we go. There it is right there. If you see this icon in your gradebook, you need to remove any restrictions on that grade item in order for students to be able to see it. So if we go to edit this item in the drop-down menu, edit, we can get rid of that clock by going to restrictions. Grade items have a restrictions tab, just like a lot of assignments do. I just highly encourage you not to use it. Go to restrictions. You see it has a start date set. So go ahead and take that off. The problem is really when it has an end date. But either way, just make sure that there are no availability dates set on that grade item. Don't check any of these boxes. Click Save and Close. And then we'll do the same for this assignment as well. It also has a clock icon. Edit, restrictions, remove any dates, save and close. And that should fix the issue. If students are saying that they can't see something, more than likely it's because a restriction was put on that grade item. Remove the restriction and students should be able to see it. Another common issue is when you get the error message, final calculated grade does not sum to 100%. This happens a lot in weighted grade books, so this is an issue that's specific to weighted grade books. And the reason why this occurs is because it's usually because you have a grade item that is not assigned to a category. So what that means is each category has a weight out of 100. So for instance, we've got the final project is worth 20% of the total possible 100% final grade. But then we have the final paper draft, which is not assigned to any category, and yet it has a weight of 30% of the final grade. So when you have a lot of items like that aren't assigned to a category, whatever weight is assigned to them ends up being the weight that's counted towards the final grade. And if you have a lot of those, it will very quickly exceed 100% and cause that error message to display. So I'm going to show you exactly what that looks like in my grade book. I've got that precise error message right now, just to show you. Final calculated grade sums to 135%, not 100%. So you have to make sure that the total weight of all top-level categories and items is 100%. So we have our categories, these are top level, but then we've got a stray item right here, the final paper draft that isn't assigned to a category. It's just floating out here by itself, and it's pushing our total possible percentage over 100% when it's combined with all these other categories, because we've got a category worth 20%, one worth another 20%, 10%, 20%, 20%, 15%, that's 100, plus the 30% that's been assigned to this little stray item right here. So the way to fix that is to put the item in a category. And you can move items around into different categories. Just click the drop down arrow next to it, edit, and then go to the category drop down box, and let's put it in the final project category. Save and close. Oh, and we still actually have an additional 5% floating around, but that's the way that you would correct that. It's probably because this grade category should be set to 10. There we go. So the key here is to be looking at this weight column on the right and making sure that the amount in the light blue box for each category adds up to 100. Another common issue that instructors often face when it comes to Gradebook is not being able to delete grade items, and that's because D2L has safeguards to prevent you from accidentally deleting a grade item that you didn't mean to and losing data that way. The reason why you're not able to delete a grade item is because it's associated with an assignment. So in order to be able to delete it, you have to uncouple it from the assignment first. So break that association, and then you will be able to delete the item. So I'll show you what I mean over in our gradebook. If we go here and let's say we want to delete the first paper draft item, we select it and then we click delete. Well, what do you know? It doesn't actually delete it. It takes you to a whole other page. Again, that's one of the safeguards to prevent you from accidentally deleting something that you don't mean to. But when we get here, you'll notice that the first paper draft is grayed out. You can't select it to delete it. Why is that? Well, we have a little question mark symbol next to it, indicating that this grade item is associated with an assignment and therefore it cannot be deleted. So we have to go and break the association between this item and the assignment before we can delete it. So let's go over to the assignment Dropbox and find the first paper draft. It's right here. We go to Edit Folder. And this process is mostly the same for quizzes or discussions. You just want to unassociate it with any grade item. And we are going to go to the grade out of settings, and let's put it not in Gradebook. Save and close. And now we see there's no ribbon symbol next to the first paper draft anymore because it's not associated with a grade item. If we go to grades, manage grades, and we try to delete that item again, we are now able to because there is no question mark symbol and it is no longer associated with an activity or an assignment, and we can delete it. So that essentially covers the basics of setting up your gradebook in D2L and some of the common issues that you might encounter. If you have any specific questions about your specific gradebook situation, we're happy to work with you one-on-one. Just email online.learning@nscc.edu to schedule an individual consultation. Thank you for watching.